Welcome back, everybody. It's the next episode of the Fearless Business Podcast. I am your host, Robin Waite, the Fearless Business Coach. I have got a very illustrious guest with us today in the form of Todd Palmer. Todd is a 20-year entrepreneur. You're a veteran, really, in the business world, aren't you, Todd? Business coach, keynote speaker, and author. And we're going to be hearing all about Todd's amazing new book, From Suck to Success, during this podcast interview. So welcome to the show, Todd. How did your journey start as an entrepreneur? Did you always want to run your own business?
You know, it's interesting. I was very much a rugged individualist in high school. I kind of just saw things a different way than a lot of my peers. You know, at times it served me well, but I really got into being an entrepreneur because I became a single father at the age of 21, 22. And the story I told myself was, if I actually work for myself, I'll control my own destiny and I will actually have more time, which was absolutely 100% wrong. I got into it because I really realized that for me, my core value, my core purpose in life at the time was to be a dad, not to be an entrepreneur or to be an employee. I'm sorry. I wanted to be a dad, and being an employee and the demands and the travel and the expectations my bosses would have from me wouldn't allow me to be home with my son every night. So I made the idea that I will start my own little business and see how it goes. But I was really doing it, I didn't even realize it, as I was building a job. And then I realized I needed help. So I had to build a company. And the skill sets that caused me to build the job were really good because I was very independent. I could cover multiple areas. Well, as I tried to scale the business, I found that what was really successful for me in the beginning, the rugged individualist, wasn't so successful when I tried to teach other people how to do it because they weren't as good as I was, or at least that's the story I told myself. Because I didn't have the proper measurements, I didn't have the proper KPIs, I had no metrics. That's not how I would do it. Well, that didn't work really well. And people would get irritated and they would quit and I'd create problems. So being a rugged individualist, building a job was okay. When I wanted to scale the business, I had to relearn or learn new skills that I didn't have. So that was a challenge as an entrepreneur that I didn't even take on or realize I was going to be taking on.
I think it's hard sometimes figuring out what you're good at and what you're not good at. It's when your business is the only thing which you've known. I think there's a certain amount of, I have a little bit of envy for people who do have jobs because you're kind of molded in a certain way of thinking that somebody has already created 10 to 20 or 100 years ago, you know, depending on the age of the company. Yet
Sure.
As entrepreneurs, when you're kind of, you found it and you run your own company, it's kind of, you're expected to kind of know it all. And that's quite a hard place to be, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. And that's where my imposter syndrome flared up because I'm growing and scaling the business. And my employees would come to me and ask me questions I didn't have the answers to. And then I beat myself up. And, I used to basically think I had to be the oracle. I had to have all the answers to all the problems, everyone's issues all the time, which is absolutely perfectionistic streak was a huge weight across my shoulders I could not bear versus recognizing and realizing that the power of the tribe, the power of the team could go a whole lot further. And instead of asking for help, I would just turn inward. I would isolate. I would operate in a vacuum. And that did not serve me well any longer. And as I evolved, and even now as I work with my leaders, I'm like, there's such a power of the tribe. Let's set up the proper communication protocols. Because one of the biggest mistakes I know I made, and a lot of entrepreneurs still make, is they under communicate, not over communicate. Let's communicate where the business is. Let's communicate the needs of the business. I just call my clients. I love working with my CEOs. I really work for the company because the company is the baby and the baby doesn't have a voice in the room. I am the voice as the coach of the business because we have to do what the business best needs, which sometimes, believe it or not, is actually direct counter to what the CEO thinks it needs, because the CEO can be sometimes incredibly self-focused versus focused on the overall good of the team, the overall good of the business. So all these things spin into place. But at the end of the day, it's being an entrepreneur is an amazing job. Being an entrepreneur is an amazing career choice because ultimately we do have the control and the power, but heavy is the head that wears the crown. With the riches comes the responsibilities, and sometimes we don't recognize that.
Yeah, and I think it's about being kind to yourself when that happens. I speak from personal experience here about sort of growing and building a team, and I've done it through 2 businesses now, which I know is not many in the grand scheme of things, but 2 very important businesses to me. When I'm able to be humble and stand up and after somebody's asked me a question and I can say, I don't know, let's figure it out together. I think you get a lot more respect out of your team than trying to crack the whip when you don't actually know what you're talking about.
Oh, dude, absolutely. I talk about it in the book. I call it ATV, authenticity, transparency, and vulnerability of leadership. If you can stand up and say, I don't know the answer, but let's figure it out. Or, hey, what do you think? I always try to get my leaders, especially when they don't know the answer, speak last. Ask the room what it thinks. There might be a great idea sitting there that you don't even know about, but if you speak first, often the tribe wants to follow the leader and they want to keep you happy and they want to keep their jobs and all those different things they tell themselves versus I have some ideas around that. But, Robin, why don't you tell me what you think? And John, why don't you tell me what you think? Sarah, why don't you jump in? Let's hear what the room says. Well, all the time, we're just basically biding our time, hoping a really great idea surfaces. all we have to do is say, you know what, Robin, I think your idea is the best idea. We're just going to go with that versus, I don't know.
It's all about diversity in ideas, I think, because it's very easy to get caught up in like an echo chamber. There's a new app, well, it's been around for a year now, but called Clubhouse, and seems to be it's the same people on the stage saying the same things like over and over again. They're getting asked the same questions all the time and getting the same answers. And periodically, somebody else just pipes up or chimes in with a different perspective on things. And you're like, there's the gold. There's the difference of opinion that's really going to count and really matter. I'm a big fan of like any, a leadership. It should certainly never be just one person.
Right.
Leadership should always be a group and as diverse a group as possible, because then if you ask 10 people for 10 answers or solutions to a problem, you're going to get 100 different ideas rather than 10 of all the same things.
Part of the model too is the leader is to create the psychological safety in the room that we can put up 100 crazy ideas. There's no such thing as a bad idea. Let's just put everything out there and then let's start, paring it down and linking up. And 100 crazy ideas might be a piece of gold. But that piece of gold is a combination of idea number 60 with idea number 90 to make a brand new 101. And that's the magic. But if we censor them, we don't allow them the opportunity to be expressed. Such a powerful thing in business as well as in life is for someone to be seen, someone to be then heard, someone to be then become known, and ultimately to become accepted by the tribe. Once you do that as a leader, then you potentially could have an employee for many, many years, a teammate who's going to be crushing it, helping your business because you basically on a humanistic level help them be seen, be heard, be known, and be accepted.